The Sith have always thought of the Jedi as a pitiful lot, wielding a weaker half of the Force. With their steadfast belief that passion trumps peace, their fire usually carries them into manifesting more destructive abilities, those that easily kill. But the one person that the Sith consistently respect, whether begrudgingly or not, is the Grandmaster. These beings are the leaders of the Jedi Order for a reason, as they wield immense power in the light by virtue of their wisdom and experience. Most Sith are forced to respect them, or at least acknowledge them, most of the time, purely based on their strength alone. But there is one thing that we have discovered that the Sith seem to fear above anything else. That is the possibility of a Grandmaster turning to the dark side. It's a hypothetical situation that seems impossible, but according to two Sith Lords who saw what would happen if Yoda or Luke embraced the darkness, it would be the worst thing that could ever happen to the galaxy. Perhaps it would even mean the galaxy's end. The end of both the Jedi and the Sith. Greetings again, Acolytes, and welcome back to the Archives. In today's Holocron, we are going to analyze the instances where Dooku and Caedus both peeked into an alternate reality where their respective Grandmasters became dark. And in both scenarios, the two Dark Lords of the Sith were mortified at the implications of such power. But before we dive in, we too have had visions with mortifying implications. Many who are watching today have not yet subscribed, so if you desire to share in our knowledge of Legends lore and the expanded works, be sure to force crush that subscribe button. It is your destiny. We have foreseen it. Now, let us open the Holocron. The Sith enjoy making a habit of persuading Jedi to embrace the dark side. They get a sick sort of pleasure by feeling that the light within a person should die out, and the penumbra of the dark side begins to overtake it. They will corrupt any well of the light, whether that be a Jedi or a light side nexus. In canon, the Sith take it a step further with the bleeding process of kyber crystals. Corruption of the light is nothing new for a Sith Lord. In fact, many used to be Jedi themselves, intimately familiar with what it's like to snuff out the light and to embrace the dark side. However, of all of the Jedi the Sith try to tempt, the leader of their order is never among them. This is usually for a very good reason. Many times, the Sith know that the Jedi Grandmaster is far too rooted in the light, and any attempt to sway them to the dark is a waste of time and energy. But there is another reason, a reason that Dooku would learn the hard way. The scene has now become famous among scholars of the Legends library, and it comes from Yoda Dark Rendezvous. In the book, Yoda has a talk with Dooku in his castle on Vajun. The Grandmaster has traveled across the entire galaxy and snuck through all of the Sith Lord's defenses just so that he could have a chat with his old apprentice. Yoda even has a simple question. What turned Dooku to the dark side? Dooku was completely caught off guard by this request, but Yoda was determined. He wanted to know why the dark side was so enticing, why it had turned so many good Jedi away from that path, including his old friend. So he asked Dooku to his face, attempting to convince him to join the dark side so that he could understand what really has tempted so many of his students. Yoda is asking sincerely. He wants to know what is so appealing to the dark side. He genuinely does not understand. But he also has a point to prove. The two enter a verbal sparring match, where Dooku insists that the dark side could give Yoda anything he ever wanted. Yoda then says that he simply wants a rose. The tiny humble request to make a rose appear enrages Dooku. Obviously, the Force doesn't conjure things from thin air, and Dooku tells Yoda to be serious, to want something else. However, Yoda continues to parry the thwart of each one of these arguments, because to the humble Grandmaster, he doesn't desire anything else. Yoda brings up that he already has great amounts of abilities in the Force. He has no need for wealth either. He has lived in a palace bigger than Dooku's, referencing the temple on Coruscant. He has also commanded great armies. There was nothing that Dooku had in the dark side that Yoda felt he needed. This infuriates Darth Tyrannus. He becomes frustrated by Yoda's continual lack of selfish desire. And then we get to this passage from the book. "I want to be safe," Dooku says in frustration. "Want to be free from fear." "I will never be safe," Yoda said. He turned away from Dooku, a shapeless bundle under a battered, acid-eaten cloak. The universe is large and cold and very dark. That is the truth. What I love taken from me will be, late or soon. And no power is there, dark or light, that can save me. Murdered, Jai Murak was when looking after him I had, and Macus Leem, and all the many, many Jedi that I have lost. My family they were. "So be angry about that," Dooku exclaims. "Hate, rage, despair. Allow yourself just once to stop playing at the game of a Jedi Knight. To admit what you have always known. You are alone, and you are great. And when the world strikes you, it is better to strike back than to turn your cheek. Feel, Yoda. I can feel the darkness rising in you. Here, in this place, be honest for once and feel the truth of yourself. At this moment, Yoda turned, and Dooku gasped. Whether it was the play of the holo monitors beaming their views of bleak space and distant battles, or some other trick of the light, Yoda's face was deeply hidden in the shadows, mottled black and blue, so that for one terrible instant, he looked exactly like Darth Sidious. Or rather, it was Yoda as he might have been, or yet could still become. A Yoda gone rotten. A Yoda whose awesome powers have been utterly unleashed by his connection to the dark side. In a flash, Dooku saw how foolish he had been, trying to urge the old master to the dark side. If Yoda ever turned that way, Sidious himself would be annihilated. The universe has yet to comprehend the kind of evil that a Jedi Knight of nearly 900 years could wield. From the shadows, Yoda spoke. Disappointment, like I not apprentice, he snarled in a wicked, wicked voice. Give me my rose. This left Dooku literally trembling with fear. But after Yoda relented, he left the shadows and suppressed the dark. He says that in a rather conversational way, that the dark side is just not for him. That simple taste had been enough for Dooku to realize just how dangerous a Sith Yoda truly was. And this would not be the last time that someone feared the power of a dark Grandmaster. The next time, many, many years in the future, Jacen Solo goes down a path of darkness due to a vision that he once experienced. He saw something known as the Throne of Balance within the realm of the Force. Upon it sat a dark, armored figure, surrounded by many acolytes, wielders of the dark side. He ruled over the galaxy with an iron fist that was seemingly unstoppable in its reach and power. There was only one man with that kind of power that Jacen knew. Grandmaster Luke Skywalker. He was the only one where the vision would make sense. This vision terrified Jacen so much that he decided that the only way to make sure that this did not happen was to control the Sith himself. He later saw a vision of his own daughter upon the throne instead of this dark warrior, and so he worked ceaselessly to ensure that this would happen, instead of Luke becoming the Dark Man. But what Caedus did not know is that the Dark Man was a different Sith, Darth Krayt, or at the time Asherad Het. Asherad, who was concurrently building the Sith Order, the one Sith on Korriban. But since the knowledge was not known to Jacen, he could only perceive that the kind of power that this being wielded was his uncle Luke. His fear would only double when he would eventually feel the real power that Luke had always been hiding, always operating below his strength, as to not needlessly murder people, obliterate them with his raw strength. There would be a day when Caedus went too far, prompting a final confrontation between himself and Luke aboard his own capital ship, which would lead to this interaction. In the next instant, Caedus found himself flying across the cabin towards his observation bubble. Luke had not gestured, he had not flinched, he had not even shifted his gaze. He had simply grabbed Caedus in the Force and hurled him 5 meters into his chair. Caedus sprung from the chair, or attempted to. Instead though, he found himself struggling against an invisible weight. He felt as if he were accelerating to light speed with a faulty internal compensator. Luke, you've gone mad. Caedus reached for the controls of the arm of his chair and discovered that he couldn't do that much. You can't do this. I know you're having trouble dealing with Mara's death, but this has nothing to do with Mara, Luke said, and you're lucky it doesn't. If she were here, if she had known what you were using Ben for, there would be pieces of you scattered along the entire length of your ship. The irony of the statement was far from lost on Caedus, but he was too astonished, too frightened to take any pleasure in it. While it was true that Luke had taken him by surprise, it was equally true that he had done so with no visible effort, and that he was continuing to hold him with no apparent exertion. Keenly aware that all that stood between him and a quick sudden death was Luke Skywalker's much strained sense of decency. Caedus let a little of his very real fear seep into the Force, just enough to seem properly alarmed. While Luke did not open himself up to the dark side in the instance like Yoda did, he did allow his raw strength to be shown as he totally overpowered Caedus. The restraint that he showed was not crushing him with the Force, which he very well could have done. Both Caedus and Dooku feared for their lives in the face of a Grandmaster who took off the kid gloves. The possibility of their power eventually becoming dark was enough to make some of the most powerful Sith Lords that have ever existed quiver in fear, to cower before the Grandmasters. Upon analyzing these two instances, we at the Archives came to a conclusion about the state of mind that the Sith have towards this event. They are absolutely terrified of a Dark Lord who knows the light side intimately. As much as the Sith like to boast that the light is weaker, they secretly fear many of its more esoteric applications. For a Jedi Grandmaster who has spent their entire lives becoming powerful in the light, they could translate all of that knowledge to the dark side instantaneously. Thus, they would gain a giant breadth of knowledge in the Force, becoming the ultimate juggernaut. Dooku says that Yoda's power would totally overshadow Sidious's to the point of completely annihilating him. If Yoda were to ever become a Sith Lord, he would become greater than all of the Rule of Two. Dooku fears the idea of a galaxy that doesn't have himself or Sidious in it. For him, a Dark Yoda represents total oblivion. It is like staring into the void of chaos. It was much the same for Caedus, who believed that Luke, had he been the Dark Man, then the galaxy would be at his mercy forever. Literally no one could stop him. What's so fascinating about this phenomenon is the sheer depth of fear that the Sith have for Dark Grandmasters. They don't really treat it as though a Dark Grandmaster would be a huge threat, or a rival. They instantly, genuinely believe that if they were to embrace the Dark, that it would literally be over. There is no fighting them. There is no resisting. The one option they have is the same option that the rest of the galaxy is using, which is leaving a Jedi Grandmaster exactly where they belong, in the light. By leaving well enough alone, they are avoiding one mistake that could be apocalyptic to both Jedi and Sith alike. Eventually, Luke also found out about Caedus' vision and was deeply disturbed by the implications of it. He didn't think that he had fallen to the dark side, but he trusted visions granted by the Force. Luke and Ben would then go on a journey together to figure out why Jacen had fallen to the dark side, retracing his steps. On one occasion, Ben was worried about his father suddenly becoming dark, learning the abilities that Jacen had learned. His own son says this: "What if you're Luke Skywalker one morning, and then wake up Darth Starkiller the next?" We enjoy this callback to what Luke Skywalker's name was originally going to be in the first draft of A New Hope, but it is an interesting prospect to consider that Darth Starkiller would be an apt name for Luke. It would reveal the power that he had at his command, and as at this point in time he had performed insane feats in the light side well beyond the powers of Grandmaster Yoda, he has wrestled control of a black hole without much strain or effort, and his emerald lightning could kill on contact. Despite all of these amazing feats, Jaina Solo once insisted that she didn't think that she had actually witnessed a fourth of Luke's true power. If he were to become Darth Starkiller, he would start by being comparable to the likes of Emperor Valkorion, and have not found many instances where a Grandmaster actually falls to the dark side. We've all had moments where we've come close, but thankfully, none of the Grandmasters ever have crossed that line. Then again, they wouldn't be worthy of the title if they had. A Grandmaster is the wisest, the strongest of the Jedi. Their experience in the light side of the Force is what allowed them to rise through the ranks, to get voted as the leader of the Jedi in the first place. Only beings of exceptional wisdom, resolve, and a foundation in the Jedi way can achieve the rank of a Grandmaster. The likelihood that they give themselves over to the dark side is close to none, almost impossible. But that doesn't mean that a chance doesn't exist somewhere else out there. And as we've explored, should that ever happen, it would mean complete annihilation. Darth Caedus, a Sith Lord who Luke said was more powerful than Darth Vader, was instantly blown away by the implications of a dark side Luke. Same could be said for Dooku and Yoda. It is not a question of if they could conquer the galaxy with their immense power, but rather what would be left afterwards. What would be left after the desolation. But anyway, my friends, what do you think would happen if Yoda or Luke ever gave into the darkness completely and abandoned the Grandmaster title to become something far greater, more dangerous, powerful? Or is it all a lie, incapable of producing a mere rose? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel and the archives today. Please request additional topics down below. And as always, may the Force be with you, and I hope you're having a great one.